All right, welcome to this afternoon's pre-meeting. First order of business, any commissioner would like to speak on any of the items for this evening's business meeting?
I'm going to take some items separately, but I would rather do it during the actual business meeting since it would be adopted during the agenda.
Okay, so any for this meeting? All right, hearing none, we will not be having a Roman United discussion this evening.
Never do.
So we will go to our next item, which is discussion item Malden and Jenkins audit phase 2.
Are they present, Mr. Chair?
I don't believe so.
No, good evening, members. Malden and Jenkins are not present. The purpose of this discussion for right now is to decide whether or not the board would like to move forward with phase 2 of the audit, since phase 1 has now been completed. The resolution that we put on to the agenda, number 19, is for that purpose. We're having a discussion here now, though, to decide whether or not you want to go through that. If you do, resolution's on there, we can move forward. If not, we can just pull it, no harm, no foul. At this point, as everyone is aware, the first phase of the audit has been completed. The findings were reported to members of the board and chair, and finance has been in the process of implementing changes or whatever else was recommended. To speak to that, I will turn it over to Madam CFO, but to speak more to that on what they've done so far.
Thank you. Ms. Merritt?
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. Just a few things of what we've already started working on towards results of the travel audit is we are reviewing and updating our travel policy, and we expect to have that completed by the end of April this year. This will come along with a checklist and be uploaded into the Buzz and to the Lexipol, so that all of the employees will have access to it. We are scheduling a meeting with the Munis PACE team to discuss open ticket items and challenges that were discussed during the audit with the employee expense claim module that were uncovered. We plan to implement a training for end users over the summer, which will go back over any changes that hopefully will come out of this meeting that we have with Munis. We are working with Director Rogers and Central Services to review the recommendations and move towards enforcing the purchasing code by reviewing and limiting the requests for checks that are coming forward. And we are also acting to collect overpayments identified during the audit. So if you want my 2 cents, I think moving forward with the rest of the audit is probably going to show more of the same, but that's up to the board.
So with that being said, what's the opinion or directive from the board? Well, this is a discussion item. So how would the board like to proceed?
I have a couple things first.
Commissioner Franklin?
Yes. First, I want you to know that even though I physically was not here, I went through that presentation in detail that Malden and Jenkins did put together. And the very first thing I want to address that I was hoping that, and I know that Commissioner Anderson touched upon it, but there was a question about 3 invoices that were directly made or invoiced to a secondary institution or a college institution. And also it was saying that about the contract itself. But I think it is very important that it goes in the report, whether it's from our attorneys or someplace, that it is identified specifically is that per section code 2-115, we talked about the basis of the nature of the purpose of section allowing for informal contracts up to $74,999 as discussed. So these payments didn't fit in that category. Also, it's important that we understand too that it specifically states in 2-10 to pay actual and itemized expenses for travel, food, and lodging for county officials or permanent county employees while attending an institution, learning, or schooling that is closely connected to the employment that the county and its citizens will benefit from the attendance of such an institute or school of learning, which expenses shall be paid from revenue derived from sources other than ad valorem taxation. We need to make sure that we're following Section Code 2-7 moving forward. So everything else that you put in place, I think is going to allow us to be able to streamline things. The other point that I wanted to speak on record is in regard to what you're gonna do with procurement office or the purchasing office, to have checks that are written or sent out without a proper invoice and going through the procurement office is something we got to plug that hole immediately. The other point and that I wanted to be able to bring up is there was some question about authorization. That needs to be clear. Not even a COO should be able to authorize for payments of anything without there being a check from either this board first and foremost, finance, and then of course procurement as well. So we need to remedy that immediately. So thank you so much, and I'm glad that you have these things in line, and I look forward to the changes. The other point I want to make is, for whatever reason, some of these things that we didn't even get that are kind of coming out, you mentioned about half-truths, half information. We need to make sure that we communicate the accurate information. And whenever somebody's communicating misleading information that is inaccurate, then we need to send a notice to them to get that corrected, as we've discussed as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And in addition to that, Ms. Merritt, what I'd like to see within the policy revision is that we make sure that for travel and training for everyone, that if proper documentation, receipts are not provided, then there will be no reimbursement.
And that is one thing that's gonna be part of the checklist.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm glad you said that, Mr. Chair. There's a difference, too, between reimbursements and per diem. It's a big difference, and we need to abide by the difference. The jurisdictions, the GSA rate is set, let's follow that. But the bottom line, when it comes to setting up these trainings, really it's supposed to go through the clerk. And I hate to put more on our clerk, but this is what should happen in the state of Georgia. And I've already said over and over again with our previous CFO, why do we have a finance department if you're asking the people here to do things when you know these conferences are coming up? You know you just need a head count. And that's supposed to go through the clerk, which also goes through the finance department and procurement, so that we can ensure that that data matches up with them. So there really is no reason for a whole lot of reimbursement, shouldn't be, you know, except, you know, me, I'm an Uber. Well, I'm gonna walk where I can walk, but, you know, the Uber, I could get that. But we definitely need to make sure that those are put in for everybody up front. You know, no commissioner should have to be scrounging and trying to find a way to get this stuff put in and know the difference between the two.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I agree with what you said, but also I wasn't talking about per diem for say, I'm speaking on the, as you said, the Uber, taxis, baggage claim. We always have to, when we reconcile our account, we always have to submit those documents. So just that we're clear that those documents need to be produced.
And that's the process right now, is the receipts have to be submitted, and if for some reason they've been lost, then you can do an affidavit thing, but we're actually gonna add a few more documents, like the agendas per recommendation from Malden and Jenkins. My recommendation is going to be to go with the per diem reimbursement and just a straight per diem
Correct.
reimbursement.
Exactly.
And you'll see this policy prior to approving, and I'll send it out a few weeks in advance.
You know, on those agendas, because, you know, I think all four of us will go ahead and get this one out, are certified, except maybe one. So really, there's a signature when you go to these classes, and I know Commissioner Davis knows about it. You got to get it signed off, and it's supposed to go back to the clerk, and that shows that you attended.
Okay.
And it does go, excuse me,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. It does go back to the clerk. So like I said, we don't have a problem. Like I said, we'll continue with per diem, as you said, but there are some of us that have to take Ubers. There are situations, just like we had the president that came, so, you know, things got turned around, with that situation and seeing OSOF and things of that nature. So we have everything generally that we need, and I just want to make sure, like you said, if we have the receipts, we just turn them in. And but we do need one designated person or to do everything, just as Commissioner Franklin said. That way, it won't be a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Commissioner Davis.
as far as this on the agenda, it seems as though Malden has made all the recommendations to pretty much shore up our gaps and holes in our policies. And my thought is, I don't see this being necessary going forward for phase 2. That's just my thought with it.
Anybody else got any thoughts on it?
Well, what's included in phase 2?
Same thing that was a phase 1.
It's all
No,
employees. So everybody that wasn't included in phase 1 would be looked at for the same period of time.
So to me, it's a replicated effort.
Well, it also will be able to let us know who owes the county reimbursements that have not been paid.
Did phase 1 not take care of
That's
that?
only for, go ahead. I'm
For
sorry.
those particular people, personally, I think we're gonna see a lot of the same issues. It's just a matter of whether you wanna weigh how much somebody may owe us versus what we're gonna pay for Malden and Jenkins to do the remaining
That's a
audit.
good point.
Yeah, I'm thinking finance would know that anyway.
There are a
They
lot
should have
of,
known it.
there are a lot of bugs in the system, hence why we're, meeting with Munis to get some clarification and get some tickets answered that we've had in.
I got a question. I don't know if you can answer it or maybe ask your employees. Were there not any type of tests done to not have these bugs in the system? Because I remember when the system first came on, and the biggest bug was people didn't get paid. And unfortunately, the head of the ship was nowhere to be found at that particular time. So did we not continue with tests? Because I, in fact, got together in a meeting and was like, where's the written documentation? Nobody could provide it. So it means that we continued on without testing this information or testing these
So
tools?
when the training and travel module went live, it was very clunky. There were some issues. There was testing done, and at one point, it's my understanding that everything worked its way out. Every time that there is an upgrade, there is a tendency for some things to get out of whack. Don't know why. But that's where we're looking now to see where the deficiencies are and what we can do. From my understanding, there are open tickets with Tyler. So we're gonna work on those, and we're actually going through the system very closely to see what else we need to work on.
Another point, I'm glad you said that, and Jason's gone, but I remember Kayla having to go in and had specific instructions from the finance department, and then found out from the IT department that wasn't accurate. So we definitely need to get back in there. And by the way, I didn't vote for Tyler and Munis and all of this because I saw their track record. So I commend you all on working on all of this.
So the question becomes, do we proceed on with phase 2 or not?
There's no vote here, sir. This is just a pre-agenda meeting.
No, I said, but we need to know to take it off or leave it on for the regular agenda to vote on it.
We could,
So we need to come to a consensus whether or not we want to take it off or leave it on. Is there a desire to move forward with phase 2?
my recommendation as vice chair is we wait until the official meeting, take the official vote to remove it properly as we should. So we've just discussed it in the work session, and then we all take the official vote, because we're on the dais and we have to take an official vote.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Okay.
Also, to Chairman, may I?
Go ahead.
When it comes to testing, and I do recall Madam Vice Chair speaking about as far as the testing, but what we have to remember is it's the vendor's responsibility to test that software product. And I had specifically asked, where's a test plan? And that consultant for there said there was no test plan.
Yeah.
And in a sense, they were a liaison, and I believe Vice Chair Franklin, you were in that meeting as well.
I was.
And we both kind of, eyes went up. There should always be a test plan in place, so I don't want to put that on finance. It's more of the vendor that we had, and they did not do an adequate job in testing that software before it became live, either in string testing, unit testing, and then system testing.
Well, can I say something to that since it was referenced? I was in the
Commissioner
meeting.
Franklin.
Yes. So Commissioner Davis, you're exactly right. But remember this, at the end of the day, the buck stops with this board, with the dais and the people that we hire to work in these roles. And it's our responsibility not just to relinquish control to a vendor. It's our responsibility. That's why we have the title of CFO, Chief Financial Officer, or even COO, because that means that the buck stops with you, and then the CEO, who's supposed to come and bring information to the board and carry out the majority will of the board. So I hear you clearly, but listening to what's happening, it sounds like it's something that was not remedied, just like we looked at day. And I was floored because we have over $500,000 of resources and nobody saw the errors in the testing. That's on us. And if we're gonna keep outsourcing everything, then that's even more on us. So that's on us. If we don't protect our own interests, we can't expect anybody else to.
Yeah, but
So I hear you, but no, that needs to go on record. And if you're telling me, and based upon this audit, these things are still happening, then it's not accurate. I mean, I got to hear from a no-name person about some information that I sent over to you, and y'all haven't even reconciled what has been done. That's a problem, and that needs to be noted.
So I will add that we are auditing the audit at this point, and we do have a train version of Munis up and running, and someone that is running some scenarios through train to kind of track what was found in the audit. So we are
Got it.
doing that internally now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, no, you got something else?
I do. Chairman, before you, that was, I believe, copies were laid up at the dais, is Resolution 2378. It is a resolution that was added after the agenda was published, an emergency, quote unquote, if you will. But it is something that does need dire attention. It was done at the request of Finance, and Madam CFO can speak to it more if she wishes. But essentially, there have been some issues with, speaking of travel and training, there have been issues with the credit card with that, as well as there have been some other issues in procuring services and goods for the county that have become new challenges since COVID. And with that, I'll hand it over to Madam CFO again.
So what he's talking about is several times since I've taken over as interim CFO, we've had some fraud on the account, as recently as last week. So the problem with that is we have one credit card, and to shut it down and then reissue another one takes about a week, and we constantly have people traveling. We have HR traveling this week. Y'all are traveling in about 2 weeks. So it leaves a lot of room to error in getting the card switched over back and forth with the hotel. So what I would like to do is open another credit card, so we have an alternate credit card. I am looking at a Delta credit card, which will also handle baggage fees. So that's kind of what my aim is if this passes tonight.
So if you do Sky Miles.
Ma'am? Yes, that too.
Yep.
So what we'd like to do is have that in place as an alternate. So if we do have fraud on one account, we can shut it down immediately and don't have to worry about people traveling. We've got an alternate to move it to. The other thing is we've had just several incidents that have come up where credit cards only are allowed. The director of Parks and Rec had a permitting issue where he was wanting to use a county credit card, and I had to say it's not written where we can use that because it's not an emergency situation. So I'd like to open it up to where in certain instances we could use it following procurement for situations that call for only a credit card to be used. And it would go through the COO's office and mine before it was approved. And we would stay within the purchasing code to do that. So it'd be few and far between, but it would at least take that off of the employees, because I believe Director Hodges had to put that on his credit card to get that done.
All right,
The other thing that it does is currently the limit is, I believe it's $65,000 for all emergency purchases. If I can talk. This resolution would authorize an additional credit card to be opened, and it would change the overall limit for both cards, combined limit, to $100,000. So $50,000 per card. Or however it works out, 50,000 or 80,000 on one, 20,000 the other. However Finance works it out, but no more than 100,000. The other issues that come up is that in addition to my understanding is not just with parks, but with other services, some vendors are no longer taking purchase orders. So, which means that they're only accepting debit or credit cards. Other members of executive staff may be able to speak to this, but there have been challenges when trying to get certain items because they're not taking purchase orders anymore. So this card would be used for that on a limited basis, again, going through CFO and the COO for the ability to purchase where purchase orders were not accepted. So,
Yeah, I have a question. Would these cards be used simultaneously, or if we have a problem with the first one, then we use the second one? Or do we use them?
So
the same
if I'm able to get the Delta card, which I would like to do, would propose to use it strictly for airfare and allow the other one to be used for hotel. And then if one goes down, we have the option to move them back and forth. And, you know, that's gonna happen again. We had it last week. It was a small dollar amount, so we haven't closed the card yet. But it's bound to happen again.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Commissioner Franklin.
I'm glad you brought it up about the signatures. I worked with several companies and never seen to where one signer authorizes expenses. It has come up even with the Roman United. So I guess it would be more so for the attorney. Help me to understand, why is it that I'm seeing that one signer? Is it that once we pass something, that our signatures count as a second signature? I've never seen any organization of $300 million be able to execute something with one signature to that degree.
that I cannot speak to without knowing more about what the internal policies are. But if we're talking about just purchases within the county, I don't know what the, I hate to throw that
We're talking about external, because what you're asking us is, everybody knows I have an issue. We have an issue with the fact of what happened in finance up until now. As we can see, some of it is ongoing. It has been stated. On top of that, found out later there was one signature on something, one signer, and I'm trying to figure out what can we do as a county within our county code to ensure that more eyes are put on something. Because personally, I don't feel as comfortable with even what you're recommending for who can authorize it.
So the way, this is different because this is strictly in my name and the county's federal ID name.
Okay.
But when you're talking about anything else that's going through purchasing, it goes through workflow. So it depends on how that workflow is set up as to who actually sees it and signs off on it.
We need to look at, we can do that post part of your recommendations you're going to be working through.
Okay.
All right.
And this, the main reason for this is because of the fraud and having to shut down the card. And it leaves a lot of room for human error when we're switching authorizations back and forth on our part and on the hotel's part. We already have enough trouble with the hotels. And it also shuts everything down where the employee would be responsible for their travel during that period of time that it's shut down.
Well, I commend y'all. The last trip I took, I didn't have to do anything at all. And that was the first time since I've been elected.
Any other
Thank
questions,
you.
comments? All right, if there's nothing else for the board, we stand adjourned until the regular meeting, 6:30. Thank you.